marketplace show, and where we chat with experts in the e-commerce industry and talk about the latest insights, strategies, and the best practices to help them succeed in major e-commerce marketplaces. I'm your host, Victor Dwyer, and our guest today is Will Haire, founder of BellaVix. Will excels in helping companies succeed on Amazon and Walmart, so we're excited to have you as a guest today on our podcast. Before we dive into the
Excellent.
mastering the e-commerce marketplace, Will, let's really talk about an intro about yourself and how you got started in all this.
Yeah, definitely, man. Thanks for the introduction and excited to be the first guest on the podcast. I've been in agency life for a little over 10 years now,
Mhm.
hyper focused on marketplaces, coming up with strategies and generally how to increase sales. Advertising is my background, so I have a lot of experience advertising on different platforms. And
Mhm.
from there, decided to start my own agency in about 2018. And I've been helping brands scale on marketplaces like Amazon, Walmart, and Target. So excited to be here today. Just got to share some of my experiences working with sellers, alongside sellers, and some of the complications that come with, managing multiple sellers, multiple platforms, and overall achieving growth online.
Yeah, that's amazing. Starting out, how can companies effectively manage multiple sellers and ensure that their product pages have accurate information? For the first question.
Great question. I mean, to kick it off, I'll start with managing multiple sellers. So, most importantly,
Mhm.
companies that sell e-commerce on e-commerce marketplaces, you often have to deal with multiple sellers who list their products on the platform. So, while having multiple sellers is great, more sales, more visibility, we all love that. It can
Yeah.
create some challenges in maintaining product page quality and consistency, which is important for brands to achieve if you're looking for a cohesive experience, a customer experience, which is important. So effectively managing multiple sellers, companies need to have a clear and detailed description, images, and specifications around their products. They should provide training and resources to sellers to ensure they understand the guidelines and how to create high quality product listings. And then another big piece that a lot of sellers miss is regularly monitoring and updating product information, as well as providing a channel where their buyers can come and communicate with the seller, the brand directly to understand what are the guidelines, to ask questions, and to get resources. And dive a little deeper into this. So, if we're talking about best practices, so if you're an e-commerce brand, depending on your size and your sales velocity, here are some things that you might want to keep in mind. Number one is to keep your e-commerce product catalog database clean and organized. So keep a single source of truth for your product catalog. Specify the roles and authorization flows for database modification. Two, map your catalog management process. So the mapping process will provide you a clear understanding of who can do what and what effects are changing. So which part of the catalog management process are touched by which stakeholders, who is affected by catalog changes, and when are they affected during the process. So this will help you kind of align your team to make sure when you're rolling out new products, when you're rolling updated, when you're entering new marketplaces or new retail establishments, that you have a lot of these pieces in place. Um, Another tip is to tag and categorize your product, your digital product catalog. So ensure your tags are consistent. If you're using Medium, use Medium. Don't switch from Medium to M to create massive confusion for anybody else who tries to access the catalog behind you. Ensure
Mhm.
all your measurements are consistent. We actually see this a lot. They'll switch from inches to centimeters, so on and so forth. Pick a specification and just kind of roll with it. And
Mhm.
don't limit your product attributes. So if you sell a vegan or gluten-free bar, have that as an attribute because it's easy for your customers. Don't get stuck into just like size and flavor because our customers will look for benefits and ingredients, so on and so forth. So it's important that those tags and categorizations exist. Fourth, and not final, but build trust and quality product information. I can go on all day about this stuff, but
Yeah.
include comprehensive information about your product catalog. Make sure
Mhm.
that all your information's up to date, and use illustrations and high quality visuals on your catalog. Your sellers, your buyers will really appreciate it. And last but not least, depending on the size of your business, consider a catalog management tool. So, if, depending on your stack, your business size, the complexity of furniture is going to have a lot more issues than somebody just selling candy bars, for example. But also your labor resources and your plans, like your expansion and growth plans. But you should consider integrating your PIM system, your ERP system, and your e-commerce systems. Your ERP system is your master data. So this is where all the master data lives. Your PIM system creates categorized content that can be used by multiple distribution channels. And third, the web store brings them all together so your customers can access that information as they need and as they see fit. So those are just some tips and
Mhm.
best practices for anybody trying to organize or just wrap your head around what it means to have multiple sellers and where they should get and gather information.
Mhm. And there's a lot of hype right now between Amazon and Walmart. And can you go into the differences when it comes to changing content? Because as we know, Amazon's a little bit easier to change content, but Walmart, you have to sometimes pry teeth in order to get Walmart to actually change and actually update that content. Can you go into a little bit about the differences between Amazon and Walmart content changes?
Absolutely. So Walmart's are different altogether. So just the structure, we highly recommend, depending on what your website is built on, using an integration system that will pull the information directly from your website and just put it right into done with basic tools like a listing mirror to more complex solutions that are out there. But Walmart is just painful. To be honest with you, everything needs to go through customer support. The bulk file uploads generally don't work, even if you fill everything out correct to the T. It's just the system is rudimentary. It's not up to what Amazon is. Amazon, we could do bulk file updates. And I will share some information on contribution rights and how it affects sellers on Amazon. But overall, from a logistics and standpoint, Amazon's way ahead of the game. Like that's why 50% of e-commerce happens on Amazon. The system's organized, the customer support, people complain about it, but it is top notch compared to Walmart, Target, for example. So you're able to get some really good, good quality support on Amazon. And the tools work, the bulk file uploads, when you get error codes and knowing where to reach out. So overall, it's a lot easier to work with. And generally, you're not going to want, I mean, if it's a large catalog, yeah, you're going to want to pull stuff from your website and you can use some type of e-commerce integration, but you want to take your top performing SKUs and optimize them for SEO. And a lot of those changes can be made using bulk file uploads if your catalog's large. If it's a super small catalog, you can just do it right from the user interface when you're logged onto your seller or vendor central account. Vendor central, you might have to run through a rep, but either way, it's a lot easier to work with. Walmart is a headache.
Yes. And I'm curious, do you think Walmart is worth it in 2023 with all the headaches it takes to get on the platform? Do you find it that is worth it to be on it still?
So it actually depends. This is a really good question.
Mhm.
So yes, depending on your situation. If you're a 1P, so you have products inside of Walmart, I think it's worth it. And we could get generally a good return on our investment, and it makes sense to have it. The shopping experience that Walmart is going after is buy on up in store. So it leaves most third-party sellers at a disadvantage because they're selling only online. They're not able to get it right to the store. So they do have WFS as a solution, and that does help. But we find is that it's just a smaller volume of shoppers that are on Walmart. Now, Walmart's a beast. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's the third largest company in the United States. So it's certainly not going anywhere, and they are investing in their infrastructure, even everything from their online experience to using drones for their delivery. So they're certainly nipping at Amazon's heels, but at the moment they're still behind. And when we work with a lot of 3P sellers who are selling on Amazon and interested in selling on Walmart, we look at it as an early mover. So while it might not be profitable, it does pay to have your products listed there and to start having that experience. But we wouldn't invest a ton of time. You're going to get a bigger bang for your buck by investing in an Amazon or directly on your own website.
Yeah. And before you touched on customer support management, how when mastering all these different e-commerce, all these when mastering all these different e-commerce marketplaces, how do you go between managing the customer experience and managing that customer support workflow? I can imagine that could be complicated. Can you simplify that process?
Definitely. There are great solutions like Zendesk is something we highly recommend that will integrate all the different platforms into one user stream. You can use uh, offshore labor or you can use internal labor in order to get those answered in a reasonable amount of time. And then outside of that, it's important to have brand guidelines. So
Mhm.
as customer, you kind of know your top facts, your top 10 or 15 questions. Have those laid out not only for your customers, but for your resellers. If you're in a position where people are buying wholesale, have it easily accessible and inside the information around the product so that when they ask, does it come with this? What's the size of this? Most of it's like, when will I get my package? And those are pretty straightforward. But any specifications around the product, safety, size, these you see a lot of. And having that information available, at least the typical questions, will save everybody a lot of time. And then you could outsource that solution to a more cost effective option, whether it's hiring interns to manage it or having somebody else take it over outsourced.
Yeah, so you talked about resellers. I see this happen all the time with brands on Amazon where they'll outsource it to a wholesaler, to a reseller to sell it on Amazon, and they see how much money they're making and they go, "Oh, I want to be on Amazon now." And then it comes in with a bunch of headaches because of that reseller with content contributions and everything else. Can you go into how that takeover kind of happens if there is a reseller on your listing? And how you can kind of do the best of your ability to kind of increase those sales on whatever e-commerce marketplace you choose?
Absolutely. We'll
Mhm,
stick with Amazon right now to make it easy, and then I can talk about other marketplaces. But resellers can be a major challenge. So, first and
mhm.
foremost, if you don't have a good map policy, if you're considering getting into marketplaces, have something in your sales and distribution channels that outline what you can and can't do, where you can and can't sell, and what are the repercussions for violating. So, like for example, your map policy is only as good as your ability to enforce your map policy, and that should be
Yep,
explicitly clear. Because at the end of the day, if they're buying the product legal and it's legit product from the manufacturer, they can list it, and your MSRP is your suggested price. Your map is your minimum advertised price, which is enforceable, legally
yep.
enforceable. So it's a much different. So how does it affect sellers? So if you're a brand and you're saying, man, John Supplies is just killing it. They're selling all my
Mhm.
hairbrushes and groovy stuff. And how can I want to get owner that market share. One of the first options is just let John sell out. The listing won't go anywhere. The
Mhm.
reviews and the BSR is assigned to the ASIN. So when John sells out a product, simply don't renew his product, and then you could just take over the listing. You could put that inventory into FBA, and you could just kind of just take over the process. Um, if
Mhm.
you're the repercussions of uh, battling for the buy box is it's not a good vendor relationship. Like honestly, if John
Mhm.
bought his supplies from you, you obviously want to honor your agreement, and you should give John a heads up of like, hey, we're planning to take. That's how I've seen it. We're planning on taking back Amazon. How much inventory you have? What's the purchase flow? So they know like, okay, John has 6 months worth of inventory. So at month 5, we'll ship in our inventory. We'll keep our listings closed so he can flush his out. Once he's out of inventory, we'll re-enable that. Another workaround,
Mhm.
if you're like, I gotta get on this, I can't wait. Consider using multi-packs as a way to get on the listing, a different way to kind of format your product, but a way you could tap into it. So John's relationship is really important because John not only does your Amazon, but he also handles your Costco and some of your other platforms. You really don't want to piss John off. You should strongly consider just using either different SKUs completely. So John has control over these 5. We'll do these. Having Amazon exclusive SKUs, so coming out with either a different size, a different formula, different packaging, or whatever else, and adding it and selling it that way. But I find multi depending on your
Mhm.
warehousing situation, but doing a 2, 3, 4 pack, as long as it makes sense for your catalog. If you're selling lemon squeezers, I'm not sure people are gonna be interested in like 2 to 5 lemon squeezers, unless they're doing like a B2B option. But those are some options we've seen to work around. Change some colors up generally work too.
Yeah, the trial packs like usually kill it, especially in the grocery category. if you have like a
Yeah.
those multi-packs usually always kill it, because usually people want to have different variety of flavors because they don't want to go all in on one flavor because they might want like to try one of each. And if you're in the grocery category, it seems like a multi-pack is almost mandatory on these e-commerce marketplaces. Do you
Yeah.
agree with that?
Oh,
Yeah.
highly recommend. And we've had some people in the gourmet grocery space, and like it's a great way. We actually do it with a supplement company too. Sell on
Uh,
the multi-pack, advertise the multi-pack, and then generally when customers find flavors they want, they'll just come back and purchase that individual flavor. They may do subscribe and save, which we highly recommend to build your lifetime value. So obviously I'm talking in generality, but comes down to your category. And what's great, you can kind of just look at the competitive landscape and see what the top sellers are doing. You can use tools like Helium 10 to figure out which
mhm.
products are moving, and then just kind of, when you're getting started, emulate those behaviors until you kind of find your own path and unique selling proposition. But highly recommend the multi-packs. I think that's a great suggestion, Vic.
Are you an online seller struggling to navigate the complexities of marketplace management? Let BellaVix help. Our dedicated team of professionals are passionate, innovative, and committed to excellence in growing your brand on marketplaces. With BellaVix, you can trust your brand to receive personalized support and expertise that will stand out from the competition. We understand that every brand is unique, which is why we tailor our approach to fit your specific needs. So if you're ready to take your brand to the next level on marketplaces, contact BellaVix today. Let us help you achieve your goals and grow your brand. And when it comes down to the potential negative effects of unauthorized sellers on the company's sales and brand reputation, can you go into how that affects the company and when these unauthorized sellers come in on your listing and how it could potentially damage that reputation?
Yeah, definitely. So just kind of dive in. So the
Mhm.
unauthorized sellers, they'll kill you, especially if you're like you have a map policy but you're not enforcing, or you sell into John and John's selling to like six other distributors and he's not keeping track of it, which happens and
Mhm.
can be a complete nightmare. So first of all, it's a poor customer experience. Your customers have online and they're expecting a certain quality customer service and a certain brand experience. John does not have the same zest for your brand as you do. He's going to
Mhm.
adhere to whatever products are moving the best. So and that'll reflect in product reviews. A lot of people don't necessarily leave negative seller reviews in the seller account on the back end where they say, hey, this seller stinks. He didn't give me, my package was 10 days late. They're going to leave it right on the product reviews. And those are difficult to get removed. So off the
Mhm.
bat, they're not going to care as much, and that poor customer service is going to affect your product ranking, which affects your SEO, your BSR, and overall, a 3-star product is a lot harder to advertise than a 4 or 5-star product.
Yeah.
Counterfeit is if you're not you run the risk of just somebody knocking off your product and selling it at a cheaper price. And this will come out. It can be dangerous. We've seen some terrible things in the beauty and supplement space, which is kind of scary. But it is a real problem in places. So not only does it make sense to monitor for that, but make sure that you're enforcing that. And what we do with a lot of sellers is we'll create an image as like the 4th or 5th image, but it's like, watch out for, especially in the beauty category, watch out for counterfeit products. Be sure you're purchasing from, and then it'll be like shipped and sold by Amazon, or shipped by Amazon, sold by insert beauty brand, or really any brand. And it's just so the buyers understand that if I'm not buying from insert brand or insert Amazon, that I run the risk of just getting something that is completely fake and that could have an adverse effect to my health. And then that will also show up on product reviews, detail pages. People will share gross pictures and they will live on Amazon for a very long time. And
Mhm.
Walmart, really, it's all the same on your website. So obviously your website's a little harder, but on different marketplaces for sure. Price erosion dilutes your brand. It'll be a race to the bottom, especially if counterfeiters start getting in and they're not respecting map policy. And I'll say it again, and you're not able to enforce map policy and get these bad actors removed. And last but not least, you kind of brought it up too, listing contribution issues. So just
Mhm.
because you're brand registered, it doesn't necessarily that you have the ability to update the title, the bullets, the A plus content. Amazon will look at who's a mature seller, who has a sales velocity. It'll randomly grab attributes. What we see a lot too, we'll update something and it will update back after a few months to like the previous version. So it's constantly monitoring these things. And we recommend a software like Helium 10 or Analytics where you can get alerts when your title, your bullets, or any of this information changes. And then you can go in and kind of investigate. Obviously, being brand registered makes it a lot easier to get things switched back. But if you had an agreement with John, like we brought up earlier, and he was your reseller, those cases can go on for a while, especially if it was a hostile takeover and John has left Zap to work with you. And another thing that we see with a lot of sellers, if they sign over their brand rights. So like if you're having a reseller manage your brand, you want to say, I license him. I give him the right, but I don't give him my trademark and say he owns it. Because when he's registered on there, it's a lot more difficult, especially if John doesn't want to work with you, to have Amazon understand, I just gave the guy the trademark, but we actually own it, because he'll still have the physical paperwork and all that information. And once he's in, he's in. And Amazon is not doesn't have the same sense of urgency you might have in getting John off the listing and getting these things fixed.
Yeah. And when it comes down to tracking these counterfeit products, you talked a bit about tracking title changes and things like that. How do you, if you have a big catalog of 1,000+ products, it can be really difficult to track these counterfeit products or buy box loss or all these different things. What do you recommend for a big seller that are on these e-commerce marketplaces to help track all this information if a counterfeit product does come in, or if you do lose the buy box? How do you recommend tracking that to keep track of all of it?
Yeah, we use Analytics, to be perfectly honest with you guys. It's a software suite, and we set up email alerts. Those email alerts get forwarded right into Slack. That's our workflow, and then it's immediately. With regards to usually the indicator is the name of the seller isn't in our database. So you can, when you're in this platform, you can search by seller. You can see, okay, these guys are authorized. We don't know who the heck these guys are. And it's a little bit more of a process for the actually product, get it delivered, look at the actual product to see if it's legit. If it's not legit, take photographs and then go through Amazon's brand registry or brand services to get the counterfeit product removed. I understand they just released an update like a few weeks ago, so it's relatively fresh, where they have sped up that process a little bit. We have not actually been through that. As the brand owner, you can submit something saying this is most likely a counterfeit, and they'll pause that person's account if I understand it correctly. But if you're telling Amazon it's a counterfeit and it's not a counterfeit, you run the risk of getting your account suspended. So at the moment, we're still doing the buy process, and it could be, really a couple of weeks before you're able to remedy that situation.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And are there any other steps that companies can take to like help enforce that MAP policy and prevent these unauthorized distributors from undercutting their prices? Do you have any other insights there?
Definitely. So the first thing, and I'll bring it up for the third time, I love to beat a dead horse, but your MAP policies are only as good as their ability to enforce. So typically what we see with the larger brands we work with, generally if you're brick and mortar retail, you have this problem. Retail arbitrage is real. It always spills into marketplaces. It is what it is. So the first thing is regularly monitoring your online marketplaces. So you want to make sure that you are in fact checking for the sellers as they come on board and making sure that they're honoring the minimum advertised price, your MAP price.
Yeah.
You need to restrict each of the retailer and distributor where they can sell the product. So if you have something in all your agreements that say, hey, you can't sell this on Amazon. And if it's a one-off, like generally retail arbitragers, they're going to have like 10 products. Just buy the 10 products, call it good. It is what it is. But what we recommend is outlining MAP pricing enforcement steps in case of a violation. And then just tell the sellers, essentially the first time you get a warning, second time you get a cease and desist letter, third time we end the partnership. Simple as straight as that can be. And it's something that we don't have as deep insight. We understand how it works, but we're generally a marketing agency, and we only see this on our end when it's a problem. Generally, like I said, it starts off at sales and distribution, where these policies need to be in place. But we work with a brand called IP Secure. David and his team specializes in buy box enforcement, map policy, and enforcing map policy. So if you're new to the game or been in the game for a while and you're taking back over Amazon, David and his team has done great work cleaning up catalogs that were a complete mess. It takes a little bit of time, but that's what we would recommend, to reach out to a professional service that actually does this. Let them work their magic and be prepared to update your policies, and then have your current distribution network sign in to the new policies and the updates, and then enforce those policies for the fourth and hopefully final time.
Yeah. And how does the buy box feature on e-commerce marketplaces impact the sales and contribution rights of multiple sellers for a given product? Love to hear your thoughts.
Nice. Yeah. So first and foremost, like specifically to Amazon, Amazon has the fair pricing policy. So what it means is that anywhere on the web, it needs to be found cheaper or match the price as it is on Amazon. If it doesn't, if it's on Amazon, you won't necessarily always, but you'll likely lose the buy box to the seller directly on the platform. But even if the seller is off of Amazon and it's just cheaper on Walmart, which we've seen, then lose the buy box altogether. See this in your seller, or even when you download some, I think mostly the seller report, you see it in your buy box loss. Vendor Central has its own version too, and you can see a dip in buy box. And if you go to that listing, you're like, hey, there's no reseller. It usually means that it's sold somewhere else on the web, more expensive. They're not looking at like eBay or Facebook marketplaces, but generally like the major, your Walmart, your Macy's, Nordstrom, like wherever you have your products, it's like a major retailer that has an online presence. And the disruption, so it disrupts your BSR, it disrupts your advertising campaigns, it disrupts your SEO. So like if you're advertising, you're generally like most of your spend, 60 to 80%, is going to be on pay-per-click advertising, bottom of the funnel, catching people in market. Well, when you lose buy box, those ads stop. And if you're losing buy box intermittently, you're not tracking sales accurately. It makes optimizing a little tougher. And also, like any good advertising strategy, is tied to some type of SEO strategy. So the fact that those two are not jiving because you're affecting one of these, it's going to affect the ability to sell, and it will affect your BSR in the long term. So generally, it disrupts total sales. It makes everything less efficient. So you're not working with accurate data. The other piece of contribution, I kind of mentioned it earlier, is that even if you're the brand registry, but a more mature seller, somebody has the rights, or Amazon's algorithm just grabbing random titles and bullets, it will affect your listing, the quality of your listing, and the quality of the user experience, which usually comes down to affecting conversion rates. So generally, you'll see a dip in conversion rates. You'll look into it and be like, hey, this isn't the title we uploaded, so on and so forth. So you just want to kind of be aware of it. That's why I recommend too, some of these software solutions we recommend, we'll know, hey, titles changed, FYI, and you can go check it out to make sure you guys actually made the change and it's not a glitch on Amazon. And then depending on your relationship, it could be anywhere from 24 hours to update and fix things up to a couple weeks, depending on the complexity of the issue and how motivated Amazon is to remedy the situation. And then last but not least, just winning the buy box. Competitive pricing is a part of it, but fast shipping, your seller ranking, and a few other factors will influence how your products perform and if you'll actually win the buy box. So keep that in mind. It's not necessarily price, but there are other factors that are involved.
Yeah. And you touched on a huge topic when it comes to e-commerce marketplaces, the different pricing and how Amazon will shut you down for those things. I've seen people where they have it listed on Walmart. Walmart lists it for lower, and then that changes their Walmart.com price, and which will shut down their Amazon. And now they don't have any Amazon sales. And then they look at Amazon, and Walmart looks at Amazon, and then they shut them down. And it's like this huge battle between these two e-commerce giants. And it's a really like big topic. Like it's like people are debating, do I go on Amazon? Do I go on Walmart? Like because of these big like conversations about them shutting each other down. What are some insights that you can gain from that, that you can provide to these big sellers, saying like where Amazon's constantly shutting them down or Walmart shutting them down? Like what are some insights that you have on that can help these brands with this problem?
Definitely have the map policies like the number one and make it enforceable. And what we'll see a lot too, especially on Vendor Central, is like they'll cut the price down to match it, and then they're going to invoice you for the difference based on your purchase order. So you get a chargeback, and that could be, to be honest with you, vendors are already pretty tight margins for a lot of brands that we work with. So getting some of these chargebacks could be critical in terms of profitability and long-term growth on the account. So I mean, the biggest takeaway is like, how enforceable is your MAP policy? Working with a third-party provider if you lack the ability, and just having that information in contracts. If it's Amazon and Walmart doing it itself somehow, maybe you have a listing price software that's doing it. Make sure your software is set correctly, and then if you're a vendor, you could submit that paperwork that says, hey, this is our minimum advertised price. Please don't dip below that. And the same thing could happen on the 1P side of Walmart. So having documentation, and when you sign on to these contracts, when you're in the 1P relationship, having the documentation of the minimum advertised price will definitely help. But enforcement is key for issues like this, and it can be difficult and it can be painful, because to your point, they're racing to the bottom, and it's like at the end of the day, it just affects your bottom line, and it affects a lot of other ancillary strategies you might have been going on, like your search engine optimization, your advertising, if you're working with influencers. So like, it will snowball into a bigger problem. So it's good to be proactive and monitor it, and definitely just try to get ahead of it with proper documentation and enforcement.
Yeah. What's funny is I did a LinkedIn post talking about the amount of the sales that you got from Amazon that you lost from Amazon from being on Walmart.com, and the price differences from Amazon shutting you down. Did you gain more sales on Walmart that counter that effect, or did you lose more sales from being on Walmart from Amazon shutting you down? And more people actually said they lost more Amazon
Yeah.
sales from Walmart than actually the Walmart sales in general. So it's like crazy to think. It makes you think like, okay, like it goes to your point of saying, like, if you're in the Walmart, like the Walmart stores, it makes sense to be on Walmart.com. But if you're not in the Walmart stores, that's when you have to really question, like, hey, is this going to be
Yeah.
worth it? What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Oh, I mean, you hit it on the head. I hit you earlier too. Like, it's just
Yeah.
smaller. Like, generally 5 to 15% of what you're doing on Amazon. So if that's gonna kill my Amazon sales, I'd rather not even have a presence on Walmart. And we would recommend that to any of our brands. Obviously, if you're in a 1P situation, it's just a lot different. But unfortunately, not a ton of brands have that type of relationship with Walmart.
Yeah, 100%. And what are some strategies that companies can use to maintain control over their brand image and prevent unauthorized sellers from damaging their reputation? You probably touched on this when it comes to a lot of the map stuff, but do you have any other insights when it comes to that?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess I'll just kind of summarize it, because I think this is a great question to kind of wrap up what we've been talking about. But
Yeah.
clear and consistent brand messaging would be number one, that reflects the benefits of the product, having that data all in one place that customers can access. Monitor online marketplaces, identify unauthorized sellers or people who are violating MAP policy. And I guess for the fifth time, enforce it if you can in your documents and with your follow-up process. Take legal action against counterfeiters and unauthorized sellers. There are some legal maneuvers that you can make. We work with a brand called Counsel In-House. Marvin and his team do really great legal work. And if you're in a position where you have a hostile reseller, you didn't have terms of service in proper condition, I'd recommend reaching out to Marvin or anybody else in the legal space who could kind of escalate these issues and help you get to a solution that's beneficial, hopefully to you or both parties. Um, Partner with authorized distributors. So obviously, for some distributors that just have a good track record, they've been in the business for a while, they understand brand guidelines. Like, those are going to be the best people to work with to help distribute your product. And then a big one is educating customers about the risk of buying from unauthorized sellers. And I mentioned this. You can include imagery in your A+ content, imagery on your product listings across multiple marketplaces. And like I said, something super simple as like, be careful of who you buy from. Ensure that, shipped and sold by Amazon, or shipped by Amazon, sold by insert brand. So those would be kind of my top recommendations on how you can get ahead of that.
Yeah, and I'm curious on your thoughts of any brands that you see that are doing it wrong. Like, if you're looking on Amazon, looking on these other e-commerce marketplaces, and you're saying, hey, these brands aren't doing it correctly, what are some common mistakes that you find when it comes down to, it could be either enforcing MAP policy or when it comes to brand guidelines? What do you see that a lot of common mistakes that brands are doing right now?
Great question. The first one in the supplement space, Dr. Gundry, who's really popular in nutritional health, he does not give anything about his marketplaces. He's really focused on his brand and how he gets his books and how he gets his information out there. But if you actually search some of his products, I think Ultra Beats is his number one product. You could see it's a lot of different people listing that product, a lot of different quality images users, and a lot of reviews on just poor experiences. So what it indicates to me is that he has no MAP policy. He's not monitoring this, so he's not as concerned about his customers. And he has a huge. Dr. Gundry is very popular in the space, and he's letting his customers down by not having something in place to protect them because the supplement's ingestible, so it can be dangerous. Has no MAP policy, and he's not really monitoring it. And then it looks like the Wild West. As a reseller, yeah, it's a huge opportunity if you can get a great wholesale price because he's done a great job building his brand. But that's somebody who I can immediately call out and say they're doing it wrong. And the opportunity, if we work with Dr. Gundry, would to be honest, we probably pull in a company like IP Secure, find out who his authorized sellers are, start going after the unauthorized sellers, and then where necessary, pull in somebody like in-house counsel, work with Marvin's team to take legal action to get some of these sellers removed. And then from us on the marketing perspective would be like create one source of data for the resellers, but also for us to start building the marketplace, optimizing listing for search and a good customer experience and getting some of the better images, because on his website and some of his social channels, he has a lot better imagery out there than unfortunately he does on some of the marketplaces.
And Dr. Gundry, if you're watching, you know what you need to do now. You know how to fix your customer experience. We're giving you right here.
Amen to that. Reach out to me, Doc.
And Will, is there anything else that's been top of mind on either these topics that we're talking about that you've been wanting to communicate, that you saying, hey, I've been seeing this a lot, and it's just anything else that you want to communicate there?
Yeah, I think really interesting. And it's somewhat off topic, but what we're noticing with some of our brands and some sales prospects that we've had the opportunity to talk with is that a lot of these sellers who have vendor central relationships with Amazon are starting to shift off of vendor and moving more to a seller central relationship, the 3P. And what we're finding is that more and more, again, Amazon can't realize actual profit, their crap policy, and your inability or the challenges in raising prices is forcing a lot of sellers out of the vendor experience. And it's really starting to be exclusive for very large e-commerce brands. Think like your Instapots, your Pyrex, your Corel. And it's making some of the smaller sellers who got into this program more difficult to work and operate through Amazon. So it's an interesting trend we're seeing. And I'm wondering that down the road, especially with some of the legal issues, the antitrust that Amazon's having to deal with, that Vendor Central may not be available for certain types of businesses if taken away at all, and kind of what that transition might look like. I'm obviously completely speculating, but this is kind of what we're seeing on the market. And I do think it's really interesting as, you know, Amazon is transitioning as an e-commerce powerhouse and kind of how it's thinking about its business and its customer experience from the seller side, but as well as from the customer experience, the end users.
And especially with inflation, like as the rising cost of inflation in the consumer goods, and with Vendor Central keeping the profit down, making it where they can't change their prices, vendors just aren't making money. Like, to be 100% honest, like people would come to me saying, Victor, like, I'm not making any money on Vendor Central anymore. Like, what do I do? Like, and that's where like Amazon's forcing people having to move the seller. Like, there's really no choice. It's like, it's either I make negative profit on vendor or I switch. Like, Amazon's not budging and giving that additional option. As inflation continues to rise, vendor makes it where you're super vulnerable as you can't raise your prices and you can't control pricing. So it's been really, really tough with inflation lately and changing those prices. And it's really difficult to be profitable on vendor now. So making it where seller is looking a lot more attractive lately.
Exactly. And that's what we're seeing on our end too. It's just ridiculous. And they're coming to us because they've been on vendor for years and it's been a good business model to recently. So, we don't want to say shut it down, transition
Yeah.
off of it. Things will swing back. They always do. But it's hard. It's painful, especially for some of these brands that have built. And, you still get to keep your ASINs, you get to keep all your reviews and everything. You just get to control pricing. To your point, like that's huge. Be able to raise my pricing so I can be profitable.
The only time I've seen it where it made sense, vendor central wise, is for very large products. Is the only time where
Yeah.
I've really said, okay, like it may make sense for those really, really big products where like pricing sort of works itself out. But I would say 95% of rest of the like seller central is probably the best way to go. Do you agree with that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that. Like we've worked with some furniture companies and it's difficult. What's interesting too, I wrote an article on drones and how the technology is moving into marketplaces. 85% of sales on Amazon are under £5. So they're
Wow.
eligible for drones. So what that says too is like there's not a ton of furniture being bought on Amazon, and most vendors are going to fall into that 85% category. So, like I said, are they shooting themselves in the foot, or are they thinking of like a strategic pivot as a business? Is really interesting, but it's an interesting spot we're finding ourselves in.
Yeah, that's a very interesting topic for the future. Well, Will, this is an amazing topic. That's all we have time for today. We can go on this for 7 more hours. I guarantee it. Will, please tell them how to find you, how to find your business, and please go more into that.
Excellent. Victor, thanks so much for having me. You can check us out at BellaVix.com. You can check me out on LinkedIn, Will Haire, like on your head, but with an E. And I post regular updates on news and changes on Amazon that affect sellers and vendors. And we have a pretty popular newsletter that follows you with these updates. So if you'd rather get in your email box and not hear me on LinkedIn, that's the best place to really check out our website, BellaVix.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Will, for joining. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This is the Selling on Giants podcast. We'll catch you next time.